You know my story, right? Rise to fame from the pain to glory, right?
Hey, how you doing, buddy?
Good, buddy. It's good to see you.
You too, man. You too. How's everything?
Oh, fucking nuts, man.
Crazy. But I have two small kids. I bought a 100-year-old house and I'm trying to run a startup from scratch. So, I'm just a masochist is really what's going on. But, it keeps me busy.
Well, hey, man, as usual, I think we're in the same light of that. So I do enjoy a good morning abuse before my cup of coffee as well.
You know it. I like the space. This is much more exciting than the last room that I think I saw recording it. This is great, man. Looking good.
Like every other week we're kind of doing like a gypsy podcast. So we did a little bit in the studio, and I'm very much very gypsy about my entire business, solo entrepreneur, all that stuff. So the studio just felt very confined and very formal. So I found a local art gallery and worked out a day rate with them. So every Tuesday, I just rent out the gallery, and then I'm going to do podcasts in here, and then another one at another location. And I'm just going to keep changing locations, so it'll be part of the theme.
That's awesome, dude. I love it. Yeah, I love what you're doing. Well, I'm Andrew Rohman. I'm the Executive Vice President of Strategy at Knapsack. Knapsack is about a 4-year-old SaaS business, a software as a service business. We work with essentially digital product teams. So folks, designers, engineers, product managers, mostly at really large scale Fortune 500 companies that are trying to build, ship, and manage a ton of interfaces, right? Everything from obviously phones, computers, tablets, but ATMs, car dashboards, refrigerators, right? Everything's got a screen. And so whether you're Spotify or your Bank of America, right? When you've got to build all that stuff, it's a huge amount of work across thousands of people in your org, right? And so doing that really efficiently is hard. Our product essentially helps them reuse stuff they've designed and built really easily so that they don't have to work on building buttons and menus over and over again. They can actually build really new high impact stuff, get a lot more efficient, focus on AI and other stuff. So it's exciting. I work in an industry that's pretty archaic, right? We design websites and apps the same way we designed posters in the 50s. And that's finally starting to change. And my product, my team, my company is kind of right in that space. So it's exciting.
That's awesome. That's really awesome, man. That's our lines are crisscrossing here in a great way, because we're doing a lot of from this podcast. We're actually getting ready to launch a little bit differently. We're looking to infiltrate, take the podcast into the bars, restaurants, and various screens that are unused in today's world. So we're walking through and identifying doctors' offices, bars, restaurants, different waiting rooms, and things like that, and presenting them the opportunity of giving them original content. So it's interesting what you're doing with the screens on the touch screens as well, because I see that as another layer years down the road where we'll, like you said, Spotify, Hulu, all that will be playing on a lot of people's devices in their houses and stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. It'd be interesting to look at, I don't know there's a lot of, I'm sure, vendors that provide, the programs that those offices use to cycle through content or whatever, and, finding ways to partner with them so you can get into that network. That would make a lot of sense. But anyway, I like it. I like a broadening distribution strategy. You're the guy to go to for that, I hear.
Exactly. Yeah. It's one of those things that it's taking that wholesale mentality and merging it with, you and I are obviously the same age. We graduated. I'll give everybody full context. So we went to high school together. We've known each other for 20 years.
Oh my.
Yeah. Let that one sink in. And yeah, exactly. And so that part there, where you were just saying there about the other part is, I tell people a lot is, you've probably heard this a lot, is our age demographic in a very 5-year range, let's say a couple years before, a couple years after. We have a very unique place where we were half analog and half digital. So we're able to see the power of traditional media, traditional out of home, and traditional marketing, and also see the power of what's sitting in the future and grab the best of both. So I think it's a really interesting time to meet people in our age demographic that have that life experience and are also in the positions we're in that are really making hybrid distribution channels, whether it be for data or for communication and marketing or whatever else.
Yeah, what's interesting, so being in the, so I was in the ad agency world for a long time, which is a very, very relationship-based selling process. It's all word of mouth referral. We didn't have selling people cold calling, right? Maybe responding to some requests for proposals, but mostly existing customers and new relationships. And then when I got into the software world, for the last 5-7 years, it's still been a very outbound driven world. You can do a lot of great content and get people coming inbound, but every large scale enterprise sales team was calling and emailing and a lot of paid ads and ways to get people into the top of their sales funnel. And sometime around a year or so ago, that just kind of stopped working entirely for pretty much everyone everywhere. And so outbound is really, really challenging. And what teams, are now going back to what we focus on. We're a small team. We're 17 people, but like our best sales, biggest deals, selling big 6-figure enterprise, contracts are coming from, doing events where we get to just shake hands and talk to people and talk about life and a little bit talk shop. Right. And, we have customers who sometimes don't get very far with the software for whatever reason in a year, but they wouldn't even think of not renewing their contract because the value of the relationship is, it drives up what we think of as the perceived value, right? They look at what they spend and then they look at the impact this partnership or even pre-sales, the salesperson is having on them. And oh my God, I can't even consider going another way. Right. So it's interesting because a lot of folks who've only been in sales for the last 5-7 years, that hasn't been the game, especially these hot startups where like the funnel is so hot, like you could sell in your sleep. And now suddenly budgets are tight. Everyone's, cutting down everything, diverting money to AI. Outbound's not working. No one's responding to emails. Like you got to go back to what worked back in the day. And it's kind of refreshing in a way, honestly.
It's funny, like the past 20 years up until like the past couple of months, it was all out. My whole life was outbound sales. It was constant business development, constant cold calling, constant new markets, constant new brands, change the portfolio, rinse and repeat, rinse and repeat.
Yep.
With this podcast, I took a different mentality with the outbound, and I'm extremely aggressive with my outbound. I have automated drip campaigns going. I have text campaigns. I have everything from the past 20 years of everything that works is what is driving my guest count for this podcast. With that part, it's interesting, like out of since I started this podcast, the most successful outbound campaign was one single sentence. And all it was is, I would love to be on my podcast. And then I had a link to the podcast.
It's, the
hours and weeks up with these drip campaigns. And it was a 90% success, 90% acceptance rate.
We have people love to promote their brand and have an opportunity to talk. We have a guy on our team who's worked for a number of companies. Yeah, we've got on our team who's worked for another number of companies and in various capacities, but largely what he does is he goes to design VPs of design, chief technology officers teams, and he says, "Hey, I'm writing a book about product teams or about AI at an enterprise or whatever, and I'd love to interview you." Right? And there's so many things that can come of it. A lot of them turn into sales opportunities. Some of them are just long, slow relationship growth. But regardless, he gets in the door with C-level executives, and you don't even need to have written books like he has. So his first book, that's what he did. He said, "Can I interview you?" And then he wrote a book and gets a bunch of credibility as being an expert when all he did was pool the insight of other experts who were like, "Yeah, I'd love to be interviewed for a book," right? Because we all have our egos. So simplicity of email, short emails, that's a big win. And giving people an opportunity, it's just like being curious is the best quality. You want to have a good salesperson or a good anything, just be curious. Just ask why and pull at threads and let people talk, and suddenly you'll be endeared. It's amazing.
Well, I think too, in addition to that, it's the difference of the sales rep. Like you just said, a sales rep that's just started, let's say somebody, or even in business in general, that started 5 to 7 years ago versus 10 to 15 to 20 years ago, their lens and their scope is so, like you said, it's very narrow on it. And honestly, this is their first. So like you and I, we graduated. I did the 5-year program in college. So I think you graduated a year of college before me. But so I graduated June of 2008, right when the market crashed. I think that we, like those of us who, and even before that, those of us who had to search for jobs in a crash market, who had to be told no, we literally jumped into the real world with adversity kicking us in the nuts. And that's what I think a lot of things, and this is not my generation's better than yours. It's a what happened during the time. And that's really what it is. And I think that the younger crowd is going to have their time. They're going to have their moment of disparity. And unfortunately, they're going to have their moment where they get kicked in the teeth. But, we've just had like a constant thing. And ours started from high school with 9/11. And then you're just blowing, you're just getting past that. And then you get hit with the financial crisis. And then you roll into everything else from there. And then you cap it off with you got kids and you're a parent. And then let's also, I was a little ahead with the parent game, but most of everybody had kids that were not as independent during COVID. So that's another kick in the teeth where it's like, oh yeah, we want you to run your career as an executive and a senior, but we also you can stay home during COVID with your kids. And it's one of those things where I look back and it's like, I laugh about it. Like I laugh about it because it's what makes us so versatile. And what makes us so resourceful and able to pivot and agile and talking to people like you that are in the startup world, it excites me because that's what I want to see. I want to see those types of people that I looked at growing up as like, these guys are go-getters. They get it. They're social. They understand how to comprehensively put together communicate their message. Like, that's the type of people that are, and it's awesome to see what you're doing and in the startup phase, because speaking from my own experience, startups are very challenging and it's very time consuming, both physically, mentally, and mostly mentally. And now you got kids in the mix.
Yeah, no, it's terrible. And the 20% sustained inflation for the last couple of years has been a really nice addition to the list, by the way.
I did leave that out. Yeah.
Just everything's, anyway. Yeah, man, startups are a lot, that's for sure. But yeah, I think it's probably why I think about, staying in the same job for too long, like the same role, much less the same company. I don't like career job hopping by any means, but I also can't imagine just being in one place in life for the next several decades, right? Because I think I never really thought about it in context of the life experience, but that kind of constant change and constant problem solving, while it probably just gives me heightened anxiety when I don't always need to be solving a problem, it's also something that gives me a lot of satisfaction. And why my job in many ways is basically like chief gap filler in the organization. It's kind of an operational role, but I'm really looking at where can we be improving the way we're doing things cross-functionally? Is product talking to go to market? Do we need a new capability? And let's go help incubate that. Let's just be a fixer, kind of is more or less my goal. And I think that's partially because that's what I've always enjoyed and been good at and been, faced with, is all right, well, another thing. And, like the Tyson quote, right? Everyone's got a plan until you get punched in the mouth, and just keep getting punched in the mouth. And, you can't plan everything, right? So like real estate market has been insane all in Massachusetts, where it's been up every year since 2004, and still been you can't wait till the perfect time to buy a house. You just gotta I need to buy a house right now. I gotta fucking buy a house, so we'll figure it all out, so anyway, just gotta roll with it.
Tell me a little bit about, so walk me through on a personal level, pre Knapsack and everything like that. So give everybody context here. We went to Mercersburg Academy in Mercersburg, Pennsylvania, a small little private school, boarding school there. And then from there you went on, and where did you when you left high school, where did you go off to from there? And for full context, well, for everybody, Andrew and I have not, we've had a lot of different cross connects over the years, but we've really not spent a lot of time. So what you're seeing right now is genuinely pretty much 20 years of catching up in an in-depth way. So.
Yeah, absolutely, man. So let's see. The most significant time we spent together since high school was the summer immediately after high school graduation, where we still worked at summer camp at the high school. Got to spend a lot of time with Jimmy here, and then we let's see. From there, so right when I started at Trinity College, which is in Hartford, Connecticut, my parents actually we'd been trying to sell our house in Ohio for a long time, and they moved to the Eastern Shore of Maryland. So I'm kind of directly across the Chesapeake Bay from DC area. And that's where they are now. And a lot of my brother lives, and a lot of families kind of settled. But that time, so I was up in Hartford, thought I'd go into physics and engineering. And then I was like, I don't want to be in labs all afternoon, all day. So I switched to philosophy. Same thing. I just like being curious and figuring out how to solve problems and convince other people that my solution was what they should believe. Very valuable skill set. I graduated in 2007. Market wasn't great, even though it hadn't tanked. And I eventually, I knew I kind of wanted to be in Boston or New York, was dating someone in Boston, finally got a job through a Trinity alum in Boston, doing basically cold calling sales for an 8-person web design shop. Knew nothing about the space, but had a job, and that was good. I hated 125 cold calls a day and 7:30 a.m. Monday reviews of my call log. It was terrible. It was absolutely horrible. It was like an old school sales guy who built a web design company and ran it like an old school. He used to do jet fighter sales for Boeing or something. And so it was a fascinating culture, but I really learned a lot of things of what not to do and how to lead and manage. I realized I really liked this sort of technical design and engineering space. It was websites at the time. Then I got into, I stepped out of that company, went into another couple of digital agencies where we were doing a lot of website design and development, app design and development, some cool stuff like, digital installations in the Sam Adams Brewery where you could explore their beers. A lot of fun stuff. And then I got a chance with that company when we got acquired by a big public group. There's 3 or 4 big conglomerates in the ad agency world. Interpublic Group is one. They bought the agency I worked at. I got a chance to move to New York and open the New York office, which really meant have a desk inside a bigger office of an agency in a tower owned by IPG. And it was horrible because there was like 100 of those people and they'd want our help doing something that they didn't understand and couldn't afford. And I'd be like they just stand around you until you say yes. So New York was a lot, but it gave me a lot of professional experience. Also really helped me figure out how to stay zen in like New York's a fundamentally unhealthy place to live, even though it's a lot of fun and wonderful. Add on that work stress. Like that was an interesting time. Ended up moving back to Boston. I had a great relationship with the leadership of that agency where I was like, I'm going to come back and get burnt out again because I was burnt out before New York, but like, hey, cool new challenge. I came back. I got pretty burnt out. They helped me do some career planning, and I decided to actually take 6 months off and really do a couple of months of like nothing. I quit my job. I got engaged and I bought a dog in the span of like 6 weeks. I was like, I gotta make my life about those things. You know, the golf balls in the jar before you start pouring in the sand, that whole thing. And then I stumbled my way into the software world at a company called Envision, which is now winding down, sadly, after being a unicorn startup. But it was a company that did really easy interactive prototyping. So instead of when you're designing websites and apps, handing people PDFs that are going to look a lot different on a screen when you finally see it, they would make that more interactive in a really easy way. And so it was a hugely popular tool. We got like a $2 billion valuation, a lot of money raised. I joined just at the right time, and I actually found it because I wanted to work remotely. I had just been off for a few months, and I was like, I'm never commuting back to an office ever again. And this was in 2017, January, February 2017. It took me a long time to get a job there because they had raised a bunch of money and were hiring a bunch of people who knew how to sell and support software. And I knew nothing about. I'd never been in the software world, but I knew a lot about the industry they were in. It was interesting because I've now seen this a few times where a company is hiring really fast. And it's a niche industry where like there are not a lot of salespeople that have sold to VPs of design in that world. And so it took a while for them to convince me to hire me, but all the people with my type of background did really well there because we knew the space. We could be authentic and empathetic with, you know, the users per the relationship comments. So I got a chance there to start a new capability when they were growing, which was basically the pre-sales, like technical consulting team. And it was a lot of fun. I built a team globally. The company was kind of fizzling out. And even though I had a nice gig there, I was too passionate about this space that we're in of digital production and the opportunity to kind of evolve the way these things get built. And so I had known the guys that were running an agency that was in the process of turning into a software company that is now Knapsack. And I made the smart choice with a 6-month-old, 6 months into the pandemic to jump into a company with no funding and like no, you know, I don't know, we figured it out. So you know, the whole goal was I had missed the really exciting part of the rocket ship journey at Envision. I had like a cool growth period, but you know, my options didn't end up being worth anything. And like, it was fun, and I learned a lot, but I really wanted to be part of, you know, ground floor up trying to build something. And we're on our way. We got amazing customers, a lot of great investors. It's also, no matter how well you're doing in a startup, it's always like, it doesn't matter unless it keeps going well. And so, you know, that's just a nice constant stressor. But, you know, overall, I have exactly what I wanted to have along the way. I have bought a house and have a 4.5-year-old and a 1.5-year-old, and that's just insane. But we love where we live, North Shore, Massachusetts. I'm busy. I like what I work on, so it's all good. It's all worth it.
That's awesome, man. Tell me about your wife. What does your wife do for a living, and then how do you guys kind of balance out the work-life balance together?
Oh, I don't know. Horribly. No. My wife's awesome.
I'm still waiting for somebody to give me the golden rule. So you're good.
No, I haven't figured that. My wife's name is Courtney. She actually, so my best friend from college, who I only went to school with for a year and a half or so, we stayed in touch. He had gone to high school and was best friends with my now wife. We met when we both lived in the Boston area. You know, we're friends for years and then finally started dating. It's a good way to do it always. We dated long distance when I was in New York. She moved to New York, and then we moved back and got, you know, engaged when I quit my job. She's a physician assistant. She does orthopedic surgery. So hip and knee replacements 3 days a week and clinic 1 day a week. So she's often gone at 5:30, 6:30 in the morning, which is fun with the little kids. We do have a nanny who comes to help out. We poached one of my son's preschool teachers when the daughter was born. She's awesome. So that's actually the real answer is our nanny, Alex, is a lifesaver. But otherwise, you know, it's there's not a lot of downtime, right? She's up early. If you know, I'm usually on kid duty for a little while. Nanny shows up, try and squeeze a workout in before like coming to my desk, doing something like this or getting on a call. And then pretty much at 5 o'clock, I got to go let the nanny off because it's expensive. And then, Courtney will be home sometime between 5 and like 7, depending on, surgery's wild, things go crazy. So, we do a good job of working in balance, and, giving each other breaks is really the key, because it's just all a lot all the time. But, we're lucky where we live. There's a lot of stuff to do. There's park across the street, there's beaches, it's a great family, oriented area. And yeah, she's from Massachusetts. So she also has a family. It's a couple hours away. So the in-laws are just far enough away to not be here all the time, but very accessible when you need them, whether for dog care or for child care or whatever. So,
how about your brother and stuff? He's down in Maryland?
Brother's down in Maryland with his wife and his daughter. He lives in the same town as my parents. So, my brother Greg also worked at the summer camp, also went to the school I went to before. I actually also just learned, this is a weird incestuous thing. Rick Hendrickson also just became the athletic director at Northfield Mount Herman, which is the high school that my wife and her and my best friend went to, and is like 2 miles, not 2 miles, probably 10 miles from where my wife's parents live.
Oh, wow.
So I just learned that. I haven't met up with him yet, but we're out in that area all the time. One of my favorite golf courses is right down the street from it. So a lot of ties. But yeah, Greg's down in Maryland, and then I got a sister with 2 kids, lives in DC, but has a place also not far from where the rest of the family is in Maryland. So I'm the odd duck out that is never at the 4-time-a-week meals and guilted all the time. But they're all coming up to Cape Cod this in a couple weeks, so I get to see them without having to travel too far. So
there you go. You get the condensed attention, as opposed to everybody else that gets it sporadic throughout the week. So that's the good part,
Yeah, and they're always like, "Oh my God, did you talk to so and so?" And I was like, "No, I don't talk to anyone on the phone ever, because my life's insane." But I'm not part of the Whisper Club, but it's okay. So yeah,
I'm trying to get out of the family text thread Whisper Club. Somehow it got into extended family, and it's way too many memes and too many things going on right now.
just mute it. Just hit the mute button. But I think how do you maintain balance? The other thing is, like, we have to constantly remember, like, this. This isn't necessarily the phase of our life that's supposed to be super relaxing with a lot of, expendable cash, liquid cash and all the other things that we want to have. It's a lot, but we try to do our best to lean in and, leave your phone in the other room and do one thing at a time. And, but it's all a lot. That
right there, that this is a temporary phase, is so crucial to sanity when you're parenting and balancing and everything like that. Like, I keep telling myself all the time, it's like, my son's going to be 13 here in a couple of weeks, and it's like, or in November. So it's like, well, I got 5 more years that I just need to get through this.
Yeah, and don't wish time away, right? I believe in that. I got little kids, but like at the same time, you can keep yourself sane. George Harrison, right? All things must pass, right?
That's exactly it.
Good, bad. Otherwise, I try and think of those maxims a lot. Nothing's ever as good or as bad as it seems. Try and stay even keeled. Try and just weather the storm. Things will be good.
I want to talk a little bit about let's move over to career-wise on this. Currently, with what you're doing and everything like that. Like, we joked around in the very beginning. Like, you and I are very similar in the sense, and I have a Robert Frost tattoo on my body to exemplify this as well. Like, we're not. Those roads, when they diverge, like, we're always, you definitely, your career has taken the path of least resistance, or the path of whatever most resistance, I'd say, like, as far as that goes. And we've gone the same way as far as that goes. We've chosen not cookie cutter formats. We've chosen it's corporate, but not necessarily the established corporate. So everything is still fluid. Everything's still evolving. Nothing's consistent. That is a different psychological mentality that a lot of people, and this is not a bad thing, but it's just not a lot of people are built in that way. Talk a little bit about you personally. Is that something that drives you and gives you energy? And like you said at the beginning, that fixing things, do you think that constant need to fix things is what has driven you so much success and energy into the startup world?
Yeah, I don't know. It's a good question. I certainly I like affecting a lot of things. I've always, even back in college, I lived in a house for 2.5 out of the 4 years with just a few other guys, but it was a fraternity that a lot of folks, it was an awesome group, right? But I was like the old man of the house, right? So I had lived there for a long time. I had been a brother since we didn't do, actually that one did do freshman year. rushing. So I'd been a brother for a long time, and I knew all the stories, and I always liked having that role. I kind of had it at the agency I worked at for a long time. I like being involved in a lot of stuff, being a bit of a utility player. And so the ability to do that at a startup at a small stage was really exciting. Combined with the ability to have not just be involved in a lot of things, but have a lot of direct impact and see the fruits of that labor and really build something. But also not do it alone, because I really like being a part. Like I've always said, I don't really want to be the CEO. I'd like to be the number two. That's kind of where I am, right? I love to help make all the things happen, but not frankly have to deal with investors and all the bullshit. So, you know, I it's not all that you paint it up to be, right? You get in, you're like, oh shit, there's too many hats. I got to go work in a really big company where I can get lost as in the cogs for a little while. And then I'll get really bored doing that too. So I don't know. I've always, from my dad will also tell you, he always told me, go work at a big company. You can always go work smaller. Big companies have great training programs. And so I went into work for a 6-person web design shop. And I've worked as big as like 1,000-person company at this point. But I like I just like to see that I'm affecting a lot of things. And I like to, have both accountability and authority and also some ambiguity, right? To be able to define how things work, or at least to work in an environment where it's appreciated to question, how we do things, and you can't not create chaos, but like have people there who are, constantly looking at, are there better ways that we can do this? Especially as you're bringing new people in, right? Like I hire you to help us do a thing better because we're only doing it as well as we figured out so far, right? And so that nimbleness certainly can be a challenge, but it's also really exciting for me. So yeah, I don't know. I don't know exactly where that comes from, but somewhere rooted in the same reasons I liked philosophy and physics and engineering before that, right? Just like figuring out how things work and if there's a way to tinker with them and, a better way to optimize. So I don't know.
I think it's a good thing, and it's a compliment actually, because I'm learning recently, and for myself, in the past year and a half, and especially the past 6 months, working with my my partner and best friend from college. So one of my roommates from college, he's now the CTO of this the podcast network and everything like that. He recently retired from Vanguard at 39 years old. So we're now taking similar concepts in IT structure and things like that and building it into the business. And it's so funny. Like we'll sit down and he'll pull out the jargon and everything like that, and we'll be working through, and I'll be like, oh, what are you talking about? And I have no idea what he's talking about, because he's bringing that corporate structure in because we need to, but we also are making a twist because of efficiency, where we're making it more nimble and everything like that. So it's funny where he'll be like, oh, well, this is what it's called. And I'll be like, oh, well, that's this. And this is what I do whenever this situation comes up. He's just laughing at like how resourceful some of these scenarios are. It's like, make $1 be used is what he's amazed by.
Yeah, we had totally. We've had, various times we had a product leader come in because we didn't have anywhere near enough structure, and she was really, really good for our company and did a lot of helped us a lot. But we got to a point where we were then operating like a 40-person team when we had 6 people in product, right? And so you need to be able to take the advice and inspiration and then find the right way to make it work for your team. And I think the resourcefulness is a huge part of it. Right? We had someone who was telling us recently from another product company that does $300 million of revenue a year. We had someone who told us on their product marketing, she's like, how do you do all the content you do? We do blogs and webinars and in-person events and thought leadership. And we have our whole company, 17 people. She's like, we have 200 people in our marketing department and we can't keep up that pace. I'm like, I don't know. You probably have a lot more steps through your approval workflow and, all the things, right? And so, leaning as close as possible to the move fast and break stuff while also being, deathly paranoid that you can't make a misstep because you're trying to make this thing take off like a, rocket ship unicorn is a fun, constant balance. But I like it more than the alternative, as much as sometimes I wish I could just kind of fade into the background. I haven't particularly built that capability in pretty much any part of my life at this point.
That's awesome. Walk me through currently with Knapsack. Walk me through what's your target customer profile, and anybody that's listening and from a human connection feels like connection with you and wants to work with you and things like that. What types of businesses do you guys like to work and partner with?
Yeah, so our ideal customer profile is, I would say a 30-plus-year-old non-natively digital large business, right? And so we work with a lot of big box retailers, a lot of pharmaceutical companies, banks, direct, to consumer companies. There are certainly natively digital companies in there, but the teams that are that benefit the most are digital product teams. So your engineering, visual design, user experience design, analytics, QA, accessibility, sort of the whole product org. Those teams that are working at scale, that either have a lot of different brands or that have just a ton of products across web and mobile, or really what's a most common initiative we see right now, a most common like CTO initiative in a company like Vanguard is replatforming how they deliver user interfaces. So how do I deliver the Vanguard experience to everything across, again, phones, tablets, computers, anywhere, anybody, and that's investor, any of those big companies that are managing a big product team. So directly, we work with heads of design, CTOs, heads of engineering, to help them create, 30 to 80% efficiency in how they deliver. And a lot of them are doing replatforming because they know that AI is coming and they're not ready to use it yet. They separately have investments in machine learning model, like large language models, exploring AI, so scared about what it means from a data security standpoint. And so they're diving in, but also treading carefully. And at the same time, they know that a lot of these teams are thinking about generative AI, generative production, right? I want to be able to say, hey, give me a new marketing landing page for this campaign. And 95% of the work just happens, right? And we're honestly not far, and that's kind of the kind of infrastructure my company gets involved in, but they're not there yet. But they know that if they have 100 apps and they're all built differently and different technologies and delivered differently, the generative AI stuff's not going to work, right? So teams that are either just trying to manage effectively at scale a lot of products, or specifically going through a replatforming, looking at infrastructure for how we deliver digital experiences, those are most of the teams and most of the conversations we're having today, right? How do we deliver to all these brands without building something for every brand, right? How do we set ourselves up for a future of AI-based generative production? Because it's super inefficient to have all the people doing all the stuff we're doing today to deliver these things. And just one note that I think is really fascinating, I learned a couple of years ago, Fidelity Investments, 97% of all the transactions they do, and this was 5 years ago, initiate on a digital screen, and they make all their own apps. They have a huge product org, right? So you think of them, they're a bank, they've got all kinds of people that work in banking. They have thousands of people across the globe, a lot in Ireland for some reason, that work on digital products and engineering. And so whether you're a high net worth individual or you're a consumer, the app the investment manager's touching, the app on your phone, the research tools, so you think about the amount of bottom line impact that comes from a digital product org, and suddenly being able to make that even more powerful. That's the space that we play in. So if you're a engineering leader, design leader, product leader, we should talk.
Like for you, I can imagine it's nerve-wracking enough to not know what we're going to discuss. I'm the same way. But then for somebody that's a stranger, and my credit to them is like, I just tell them, like, trust me, we're going to have fun. It's going to be like two people at a bar, at a coffee shop, just sitting down. Like that's all it is. And that's one of the things too, like, that's why I'm trying to set these stages up the way they're not stages, but these settings and these backdrops and things like that. It's not virtual, just so anybody knows. It's a real art gallery, and then there's no, it's not a background that's a paper or anything like that. So.
Yeah, I hear you, man. I am probably overly comfortable. I've learned I'm more comfortable than most just walking into a setting, because I've worked, per my comment earlier about teams that hire quickly, and like there's a lot of imposter syndrome I've encountered in my career, and especially as a manager and as a leader. And I always am trying to coach those teams that, like, what would you do if you met a person at a bar, right? If they said, I'm a designer and I work in banking, and you didn't know anything about it, would you be like, oh my God, and like? You wouldn't be terrified. You'd probably be like, oh, I don't know anything about that. Tell me more about your life. Basically what we've just done and like, while that does help with a lot of people and like frame it differently, I also realize it's not necessarily fair, because people are like, oh my God, talking to a stranger at a bar. And I'm like, oh my God, I would be so entertained by that forever. So, you got different strokes for different folks.
It's so funny you brought that up too, because like that was like when I first graduated college. That was the most fun thing in the world. And obviously I did it for a living. So I spent 20 years selling alcohol. So I lived in bar. I was closing every bar and getting paid to do it. And I had an expense account, and it was the most magical thing to do in your 20s. If I recommend it for anybody that wants to start a career, if you enjoy alcohol, get in that business and find your right route. But don't do like I did, where 20 years later you have to quit drinking because it gets out of hand. So find your median. But with all that, but it wouldn't be part of my personality if I didn't go to the extreme. So I do own that part, that it was It was not a outlying scenario. It was expected that eventually the house of cards will collapse. So in my sobriety now, I look at things a lot differently, and I compliment John and his work, because he's really helped me kind of look long term and more or less trying to, and you'll appreciate this in the startup world, being present while also looking to the future, and also not jumping at every present opportunity to lose the long game in the future. And I always struggle with that because in the startup world and trying to start all these businesses that I've started. And I've only recently, in a few months since getting together with him on a business level, like we've been best friends for 20 years. I was the officiant at his wedding, all that stuff. But now we see each other in a whole different lens. And that education has been immensely valuable to me.
You know, it's not something I thought about a lot until sometime in the last year. My CEO gave me that piece of feedback that said, you know, one of the things I really like about working with you is you are good at working on different timelines, like seeing things on different time horizons at the same time, right? So I can see how the thing we're working on this quarter is going to be really important to set us up for something 2 or 3 quarters from now, right? Like we have some feature stuff coming out that I've been talking to the team this week. I'm like, we need to get to this place with it by Q3, because our Q4 and Q1 growth is largely going to be that on the back of the thing that we're doing right now in Q2, Q3. And, you know, the hardest part I find is, that to me is intertwined with something that is, you know, I really trust my gut. I love data, but it gets to a certain point where, like, once I hit the tipping point and I believe it, I'm comfortable with the decision. And, you know, you can get into analysis paralysis when you're thinking about things 3 quarters out, right? And you don't know, right? And so getting to a place where you've had enough experience to be like, you know what, I'm glad I trusted my gut, or damn it, I should have trusted my gut. I'm fortunate to have that level of confidence in my gut, I think, although it's dangerous. But it makes other people sometimes uncomfortable, and not everyone can think about the 2 horizons and are just, let me just focus on the now, and better focus on the now than just the super far out. But getting other people to come along and finding ways to enable them and communicate what you're seeing, and not just sound like a dude who's ranting about a whole bunch of shit that other people are like, I don't really know if I can follow. Like, that's the biggest challenge I have. And I feel fortunate I have that ability, but like, how to get other people to come along with you. And in general, as a startup leader, that's a big challenge, right? Especially, like, I've been in this every day for 4.5 years. We have people we just hired to be the first conversation and writing emails. And like, you know, how do you scale? How do you get people to come along with you? I guess that's true to a lot of things in startup life, but especially the kind of short and long-term vision piece, I think.
Yeah. And it was always funny. Like his biggest thing when he did an analysis of everything I was doing was like, I was doing it for other people. Like, I was getting hired to business development, grow their businesses, do all these things, think strategically, think long-term. But the psychology, when it was my business, I was so reactionary and so survivalist that I couldn't, like, let my head kind of see the big picture with my own business. It was like the marriage counselor that's 3 times divorced. You know what I mean? You feel like a hypocrite at the end of it. You know?
Totally. I always joke about this because my mom ran a business for a while called The Learning Connection. She's worked with folks that have different types of learning challenges, largely like adults with ADHD that when they were kids, that wasn't really a thing and never really had any tools or training or resources. And yet, you know, my mom being of that ilk, and she would help these people be transformational. Some of them be 60s, 70s, as well as kids in college. And was like the most you go into her office and I'm like, I'm just going to back away slowly. But you know, like, she was so wonderful for all these people and has been wonderful for my brother and helped me and all. But then sometimes I'm like, you don't see it. But you know, the pauper's kids, right? Too, had no shoes. Isn't that the whole thing? So, you get it. Hard to do at home sometimes.
Well, hey, she got, what was it? Your brother was able to utilize that energy, and didn't he get a perfect score on his SATs?
He did get a perfect score on the SATs. Back when it was the 1600 perfect score, he did get a perfect score on his SATs. He also never graduated college, and he went to a bunch of them. So, you know, and again, everyone's on their own journey, and
we love you, Greg.
He's doing great and has a beautiful daughter, and you know, yeah, things work out.
I gotta tell you, and where he is, I think there's a thing you can tell with people, and when you watch his videos at the dealership, you know that, like, he loves just being with people, and he loves helping people, interacting with people. And I think, like, that role that he's in, you can see the genuine joy in him when he's working with people and showing people opportunities that he has for them.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, he worked in the restaurant space for a long time, and has always been a superpower of him. He's, absolutely an empath and can, make people feel good, know what they need, get a sense of how they need to be communicated with. And so, when you can do that and he's got the right environment in terms of that dealership is, the scale and resources they have is awesome, that he's able to really work with people and help them feel like they're really supported. Right. And that's going back to the relationship stuff, right? When you are able to invest in a relationship in the sales process where someone feels like you're their partner in solving a problem that's their problem versus trying to close a deal, it's transformational, right? And we coach people who are trying to close deals. You don't just have a close plan that gets the signed contract. It's got to get to the thing the customer wants, which is the moment of success, right? And then suddenly everything is anchored to this moment of success, and then it makes it easier to get the contract signed on the dependency date 3 months earlier. So, the more that you can be empathetic and lean in and help people feel like you're their partner, it works out well. Sometimes it's also a game of trust because you're like, man, I just need to close a deal, and you're like, invest in the relationship. It'll work out.
A lot of different, I have closing questions in a lot of different ways. And one of these I'm going to say, and I being the sensitive that I am, I already have goosebumps in a full body because I'm going to have to say this and say, we're the same age. So we're at that age now where we're giving advice to the younger people. So I'm going to have to accept that. So with that, what would you say as far as anybody that is right now, let's say they're in high school or they're in college and they have an idea in their head, but they don't have the support system or let's say the finances to execute on that idea? Like, kind of how would my biggest thing of what I'm getting at is I want to empower people, make people understand that you don't have to jump into $1 million project to make an idea, to keep a flame lit. And I want people to realize that, like, when you let that flame die out and you just go into whatever job or whatever path that is laid out and then always resentful and always regretting not activating, finding way, or I guess being resourceful and finding ways to scale at a sustainable way and try to test ideas out to kind of realize that you having the flame makes you unique and not a lot of people have that flame.
Yeah, absolutely, man. I think there's a couple ways I think the flame gets smothered. One is through ignoring it and saying, giving it up, etc. And the other is through almost obsessing over it internally too long. I was just reading a thing this morning from an advisor of mine who's an artist, a product leader, a designer. And, the first thing that came to mind when you were talking is what he said, which is like, you got to get it out, find a way to get it out. And it doesn't have to be broadly. You don't have to give away your idea, but share it with, find people who you think might be excited and passionate, even if they can't help you, just to give you feedback. And it'll give you something back, right, from just having this thing. And also, if you incubate it too long, you start to get perfectionist and you start to obsess over it. And so I think, being able to find ways to get that creative idea out of you and create those feedback loops that might also turn into someone being like, holy shit, I'll invest. You never know, right? But you can't just bottle it up. Whether that's because you're perfectionist or because you say there's no time for that, right? I have, while my dad would have wished I went into a, hot, big job and didn't, take out a loan to take 6 months off one time. I do think he always encouraged me going into college, find a major that you can do well in and that you enjoy the professors and you enjoy taking, right? Don't worry, especially in a liberal arts college. I went to a great liberal arts school. And so which I think is a great way to go unless you're going to do something truly vocational. Right. And so don't get yourself into a path. And even at the time that I took off 6 months, it was because I was at a point in my career where I was like, crap, I'm just going to keep going down this path that I just basically fell into because I got a job. Right. And so many people do that. They get a job and that's just what they do in that industry. And they may hit a ceiling and then they just have that job forever. And I'm like, that sounds so boring to me. And so that's you, cool, right? If you know what you want to do, awesome. I don't think anyone who's 15 or 20 knows what they want to do. But respect the flame. And the thing I would say, actually, this can happen to anybody. I did this when I took time off. You can get methodical about sort of career planning, and it can be something that evolves over time. I did this to say, I knew I wanted to take a turn in my career. I didn't know what it was. And so what I did is I spent some time documenting and getting feedback on stuff that would feed into a description of the type of life I wanted, whether it was about flexibility in work or things that I really liked doing, but wasn't good at, things that I was good at, but didn't like doing, things that feelings that I enjoyed in work settings. I emailed a bunch of people I knew and said, hey, can you share some feedback with me about, untapped abilities or whatever? I forget what I wrote. But, I got this list of, imagine a big spreadsheet, and there's a list of all these things that mattered to me and that I did or did not want. And then I started interviewing people about different jobs. I was like, what's it like to be a real estate agent? What's it like to be a computer programmer? And, that helped me get kind of objective around like, am I being accountable to myself and the things that I actually want in life? And you're going to take, make an informed decision, right? You're going to take a job that says this pays really well. And like my next job, I might go work at a big ass company and take a big paycheck because I've worked at a small company with too much stuff to do and not enough comp for too long. But that'll be an intentional decision. And I'll be like, this isn't forever, right? So if you start to get methodical about understanding what makes you tick and keep reflecting on that, keep evolving it, I think that can be really helpful. So you don't just get lost down some path that you just were on because it was in front of you, right? Which is the danger, right? I think in a professional context. So I don't know. Those are my thoughts.
No, it's perfect. Andrew, thank you so much. And I'm looking forward. We're gonna have a business conversation separately later this week. I'll send you an invite there with Johnny and stuff. I want to thank you. I want to thank you for a couple of reasons. One, like I said, for hopping on cold, not knowing any questions or anything like that, and knowing that anything could come out of my pockets at any point. So I had some tricks up my sleeve, and you were comfortable with it, and I appreciate it. But secondly, and most importantly, is being who you are and pushing people, and what you just said about driving that light and keeping that fire lit. I think there's a lot of times where it is a lot of times, and it's anecdotal, but it's also societal, where we think that we can't do things, and we think that we can't do what we really can do. And also on the other side is, I encourage people, and I want to close every episode like this. This series is called Old Friends, New Stories. I get disgusted with hearing people in their 50s being lonely and 40s being lonely and things like that, and knowing that they used every chapter of their life and closed every door as they moved forward in their life and never went back to open those doors. And I really want people and to understand that buddy in college or that girlfriend in college or whatever it is, like, I'm not telling you if you're married, don't be calling your girlfriend in college, but your buddy in college that you really had a good time with and you haven't talked to in forever, and maybe you see his LinkedIn post or you see his Facebook post and he's either not doing well or he is doing well. Regardless, reach out to that person, because I tell you what, this world's a crazy place and it's about to get crazier in the next few months. And human connection, I think, is the most valuable asset we have left.
Yeah, man, I've really tried to live in the last few years where, like, if some random person crosses my mind, guy I worked with a few years ago, whatever, shoot him a text, shoot him a LinkedIn message, be like, yeah, dude, just thinking about you. Let's catch up sometime. And a lot of those have turned into monthly, bi-monthly catch-ups, which we skip, 6 in a row and then we have one. But just to keep those relationships alive, I totally agree, man. That's it's incredibly valuable for all of us. And I think we all have more people around than we probably think about on any sort of daily basis that can help us out.
That's exactly it. I think that at the end of the day, people don't realize the viable network that they have, and that's really what it comes down to. So in closing, remind everybody Knapsack, where to find, social media, websites, all that stuff, and then you personally.
Yep. Absolutely. Knapsack, if you're in the design system or digital product space, knapsack.cloud is our website. We've got tons of stuff on YouTube. You can find us on LinkedIn. I don't shut up on LinkedIn, so you can find my posts easily. Or you can email me, andrew@knapsack.cloud. Always happy to talk about the software or just talk shop and what's up in the world of digital production. It's where I've spent a long time now, it turns out.
Awesome. What I'm going to do is I'll shoot you an email with this episode, and I'll use the system so you can see what the deliverable looks like and you can see it in real time. And I appreciate it again, man. Thank you so much for taking the time, and you enjoy the rest of your day. I'm looking forward to catching up again with you this week.
Thanks, man. Yeah, it was awesome to catch up. Good to see your face. Let's talk again soon.
You take care, buddy. Thanks again, buddy.
If you're an aspiring entrepreneur or one that's looking to expand, contact the FreeMind Network today, and we'll help you scale. We'll help you start. We're going to be there for you, in your corner.
You know my story, right? Rise to fame from the pain to glory, right?